I've never been to a run where I felt worse. Like it's always helped. And it just kind of gives you a bit of perspective of what's important in life. And I think having connections and feeling part of something that's bigger than yourself is just like a super nice thing to have.
For too long, I was a solitary runner, and I thought that was enough. But it seems I was missing out. Across the UK, there are a huge number of free running communities that happily welcome any runner with open arms. They make running fun, motivate you to feel better, and are a great way to meet other like-minded people. One community I'm now part of is Midnight Runners, which are one of the most energetic and loudest groups in London.
We run with music on our sort of Tuesday night runs, which just kind of gives it this such high energy feel. There is just something about being in this. It almost feels like a flash mob that's moving, and tourists are taking photos.
James Holt is the head of Midnight Runners London. And even though James comes across as a very confident leader, that wasn't the case when he first joined the community.
When I first joined, I was very, very shy. So I was that person who was like, just turning up was a difficult thing. And I just kind of would stand at the back of the group and occasionally have a few chats with people. But when I just realized that no one was there to judge me on how fast or slow I was, or how cool my running gear was. People were just there to have a good time. And I was like, what's not to like about this? It's completely changed who I am and brought me out of my shell.
James's story of finding his confidence is a great example of why being part of a community is so beneficial to your life. In this conversation, we discuss James's story of growth within Midnight Runners, the practicalities of leading one of the largest running groups in the UK, how integral the team of volunteers are, and James also reflects on recent events which nearly caused him and his team to lose the very community they had spent years building.
It was awful, and I just started crying in the office, in this meeting room. I was like, what have I done? This is just an awful situation. And I was just in pieces. It was one of the lowest points of my life. And I know my friends who I've told about subsequently, it's just running, James. It's just a running group. Why does it matter? But I can't describe to them, and you've probably got a sense of it. So the idea of walking away from a huge part of you was just a gut-wrenching prospect.
That's all coming up in episode 2 of Great British Adventures. We've both done our long runs this morning in the City of London. You were out with some friends in Hyde Park.
Indeed.
Very speedy, I saw.
Well, the unofficial name of Speedy Boys, we're looking for a more sort of gender-neutral name, but Clara just referred to as, you're going to run with the Speedy Boys. I think the Speedy Boys has now got legs, those legs which are quite sore after the run. But Hyde Park's really nice. I'd never normally run around there because sort of sticking to East London, running along the Thames Path. But Hyde Park's lovely, especially early in the morning. You just sort of see runners out getting the nod.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was good. And getting it all done before midday. I'm feeling productive. I'm feeling energized.
Yeah, your mileage I've noticed on Strava has been going up. You've been doing some speed sessions, some longer speed sessions. It must mean you're in some kind of form of marathon training. Am I correct?
Is that a leading question? Yeah. So I have Barcelona marathon next month. But
which date's that?
Ooh, put me on the spot. End of the second week. It's like 17th, 18th ish of March.
Okay, it's probably after we broadcast this. So I'll have to fill in what you did on afterwards.
Yeah, crashed and burned, but in a glorious fireball of good effort. It all kind of happened a bit late. I wasn't planning on sort of going hard for any race really, because I've just been kind of enjoying my running more relaxed recently. But this Tribe Freedom Foundation were putting on a sort of a charity event, raising some money, and the idea was you'd knock 10% off your PB, and they've got 80 runners going out to Barcelona, and it's going to be they've got training sessions that we've been doing as a group, and it's been quite nice. Some people it's their first marathon, other people are a bit more experienced, but it's I spend so much time with Midnight Runners, which I know we'll get on to soon, but spending some time with a different group and who are kind of on their own running journey has been quite fulfilling. So I did commit to myself that I will give it a good go and try to do some structured training for a change, because last time I did that was probably 3 years ago, training for Budapest, which is where I got my current PB. 10% off that is not happening.
I was going to say,
It's
so
not happening.
you're part of this 10% group, right?
That's it.
And so what is, sorry, your PB?
It is 244.
244,
which I
and to
got
shave 10% off that
is ludicrous, and I don't have the will, the way, the dedication. I think
that's a fast marathon time. This is super fast, because I think when you think of marathons, people aim for, first of all, just finishing it, then they go for like sub 5, sub 4s. Sub 3.5 is a very respectable time. And I say that because that's where I fit.
Very respectable.
A sub 3 is like, for a lot of people, especially guys, is like the gold standard.
Yeah.
And if you can get there, that seems like you're a really serious runner, but you are way under that.
Yeah, and I think it's just been running's been good to me, because I get a lot out of it in terms of like the mental side. Like, it's just a great way to switch off or to connect with new people, and that's how we met. But sort of the performance side is an avenue that if you want, you can dip into, and I think I have got some natural ability which makes it more enjoyable, which I'm very fortunate to have. The 244 I was over the moon with, and I got to the finish, and there was a small group from Midnight Runners who went out to Budapest. Maybe, I should say small group, there must have been about 20, but everyone was treating it as we're off on a jolly holiday. We're going to go out in Budapest. We're going to go into the hot springs and the spa. We'll go on a few nights out, and then we'll run the marathon, and we don't kind of mind. Whereas for me, I'd been training for this as like my goal for the year. Like, I was trying to get sub 245, which would be a London Marathon Championship place, because I'd just snuck under sub 3 before, and that was the next kind of logical step.
That's a huge gap to close.
And that's what I hadn't realised.
Yeah.
So it did take a lot of work, but so I guess quick tangent in terms of my training for the first marathon. I just did all my runs as hard as I could. I didn't know any better. I didn't really delve much into, knowledge about running magazines or stuff online. I just kind of, every run I just go as hard as I could, and it was painful. I didn't really enjoy it. I got round and got 2:59 and with 10 seconds to spare.
Wow.
Couldn't move for a week after. And actually for Budapest, I kind of learned a bit more that if you train sort of smarter rather than harder, you can improve. So I'd done all of the right things. I was sat there drinking my electrolytes the night before. Everyone else was on the booze, ready for their sort of big night out. And I remember I was asleep, because there was quite a lot of us in this big sort of shared accommodation. I was asleep on like a mattress on the floor. There was a lot of us in this place, and I hear like middle of the night just these noises of people shuffling in, going, no, James is asleep. We can't wake him. And then, ow, someone stands on my leg, middle of the night, wakes me up. It was not the perfect marathon prep, but hey, it all came together on the day. Snuck in again just under 2:45, and that was a very special day. But at the finish line, I remember it was just so quiet, because it's not a massive city marathon like Berlin or London. They put on a good show, but it was it wasn't full of people, and there wasn't a ton of people who'd finished by that time either. I think I was like second Brit, about 17th overall, so it kind of shows the field wasn't super packed. But I was looking for kind of anyone to just be like, hey, like, I want to talk to you, I want to collapse or give you a hug. And there was no one from the Midnight Runners group there, because they were all still getting out of bed to either come and cheer or to or they were still running.
You were just too fast on the day.
So by the end, I just kind of sat on the floor and just felt sorry for myself for a while, until they kind of trickled in, and then I just had to kind of clamber up, and yeah.
The London Championship time of what, sub 2:45?
At the time, it was.
At the time,
yeah, it's now sub 2:40.
Right,
getting
just
faster.
People are getting faster. Yeah. What does that mean? Is it kind of for like people who aren't pros but kind of semi-elite types?
Yeah, I guess that's the idea. So I'm assuming other races have it as well. I don't know exactly, but for London, you can get a good for age time, which was always kind of around sort of sub 3. And that meant you had guaranteed entry. You didn't need to get a charity place or do the ballot, which I have some feelings about it, the fairness of it, of the ballot. But so for a championship place, again, you get a guaranteed place, but you have your own separate start. And it was...
do you start with the pros, or is it just behind the pros?
Just behind the pros.
You're within touching distance of the pros, which must be special. Did you do London the following year?
I did. It was... And because I live about 3-4k from the start in Blackheath, so like I know the area so well, and I always run around the London Marathon start area the day before the race because they're setting up all the hoardings, and it's just exciting. And you've got kind of the run tourists who are there from overseas who are doing the same thing, and it's just like a very sort of special atmosphere. And it is really nice, and they do look after the athletes in the championship pen. Like you've got your own separate bag drop that's there. There's loads of portaloo, so you don't have to queue. You've got an area to warm up.
It's all about the private toilet, I'd say.
But someone had told me that you get your own individual toilet, and I was like, that can't be right. It wasn't right. Like there's still a few.
And who was lining up from the pros that year? Who won it? Do you remember?
I can't remember. That must have been, I think it was around 2018, 2019.
And when you set off, are you in sight of the pro? Are you for that first half a kilometre? Are you in sight of the people who are?
I'd say, because I think
being in that championship,
even in the championship thing, there's probably 200, 300 runners or something. So like, and I was towards. I chose to go to the back of that because I knew I wasn't. I wasn't sort of that sub elite, sub 220, like really on the heels of them. So I'd say I was probably sort of 30, 40 people deep, but I could see the start line. I could see the gun and the buzzer and the like all of that. I kind of wish I had my phone because it was pretty special. But you'll quite often see at the start of London, you'll get an enthusiastic guy who'll run out and run in front of the like elite runners. That person will always come from the championship pen, and then just go full beans for the first couple of minutes before they. Some guy did it,
didn't he? Was it last year? Who led the London Marathon for the first like half a kilometre.
Yeah,
and I heard someone talk about him talking on a podcast, another one where he said it made it look like he was just a bit of a fool because he just like sprinted off, but he still finished in an incredible time. And apparently just the hard work just to even get to that position, to be in that position, to be able to lead a marathon was hard enough itself.
Yeah.
So of course, like if you could take your moment of glory, even if it's just for a few minutes, then, and we're here talking about him now. So clearly job done, right?
Yeah.
You've mentioned Midnight Runners. You are the head of Midnight Runners London.
Yes.
Who are Midnight Runners?
Oh, Midnight Runners. Midnight Runners is so much to me, and I think a lot of other people as well. We are a social running community that puts kind of connecting with people above things like fast times. And we run as a group, we run together, we encourage new people to meet one another and chat, and we try to be as inclusive as we can be. And we've been going for just over 8 years now. It was our eighth birthday last week.
So you are one of the many free running communities within the City of London.
Yeah.
But it also exists globally. But it started in London, right?
It did, yeah. And I remember, because I've not run my whole life. It's actually only like sort of post-uni, I moved to London. I started running after a couple of years of like kind of quite a sedentary lifestyle. My partner at the time was like, "Oh, I might enter a half marathon," and I was like, "Oh, well, I'll do it with you. Maybe it's something fun for us to do together." And after a couple of weeks, I was like, "Oh, this running thing actually isn't as boring as I thought it would be."
You got the bug quite early.
Got the bug, and then we both went to something we'd seen on Facebook at the time, and it was that time when you go on a night out and people would take 60 photos and they tag everyone, and that was kind of how things were shared. Instagram wasn't a thing back then. So I went to this group that we'd seen on Facebook, and there was only, I don't know, maybe sort of 15 or so runners. Went along, and I was like, is this actually, it's quite
This is
quite
Midnight
fun.
Runners.
Midnight
This
Runners.
is your first time, which is what, back in 2014?
2015.
2015.
Yeah, sort of mid 2015. And yeah, it just sort of not because I joined, but like over then the next sort of few months we just grew and grew, because they'd have like photos from the events and they'd tag their friends who were there, and then that would show up on other people's feeds. And like we didn't do any advertising, marketing about it. It was just kind of word of mouth. And, you know, within, I'd say sort of 4 or 5 months, we were having like over 100 people at the runs. And like now we get even more than that, and it's still 8 years later and it still feels exciting and fresh, and it energizes me and clearly energizes other people who've been around for so long.
Yeah. Running communities has been a new thing for me in the last 2-3 years, and it's really changed how I view exercise and running and just communities. And I think your stories, which we'll talk about today, is very similar. But being involved in other communities, I've seen kind of the different flavors that they have. There's something about Midnight Runners that is just very exciting. But why is that? Why is it so popular? And so I guess we're talking about your Tuesday night sessions, which happen in central London.
Yeah.
Tell us about them.
Yeah, and I think we have hit a really good sort of conjunction of lots of good things. So the ethos of it being a social running group, like we're not an athletics group, we don't have a UK athletics license, and we run with music on our sort of Tuesday night runs, which just kind of gives it this like such high energy feel. So people, you're not really there thinking about the running. Like for me, it's the social, like who am I going to catch up with, and like what stories am I going to hear over the course of the run. And I think people, use it as that. It's a chance to meet new people, catch up with old friends. But I think this is the way it's positioned with the music and the fact that we stop every couple of Ks. So you're never running for that long, means that the group kind of stays together. What's difficult without doing that is it just gets so strung out because you've got such a wide ability, mix of paces. And, as a run leader, that is one of the most challenging things. Like, how do you cater for a broader audience as possible? Because even when we say we're inclusive, of course, if, you have never run in your life, you're probably going to struggle to get around the sort of 7-8K we do. But I think within reason, we try to be as inclusive as possible. I remember my 2 sisters came a few years ago for their first Midnight Runners session, because clearly I talk about it too much when I was back home for Christmas. And they're not runners. They got round and they loved it. They struggled with the running, but they kind of understood why I was so passionate about it, because there is just something about being in this. It almost feels like a flash mob that's moving.
Yeah.
And, tourists are taking photos, and
that definitely seems to be what I take away from it, is how you make the noise and you make an impact, and you turn heads. You can always tell when Midnight Runners are around. First of all, because you play music so loud.
Yeah.
But in such a great way, because there's times when I've turned up and I've not been feeling great, but as soon as like that music just switches on, when you go 3, 2, 1, go, I can just kind of just lose it all, and I can just be in the flow. I can just have this ethereal moment when I'm just like running around like London at night with Tower Bridge illuminated and all the skyscrapers and this music blasting, and just feeling like I can just let go of like all my problems and just be part of a flow of other people just going around, and like you're leading and your crew members are leading. And
you said that so well, and it's such escapism, like very pure, very easy. Because when I've had tough days at work, it could be 5 minutes to 7 and I'm feeling pretty shitty. But the moment you turn up and you see those kind of faces and waving, and you drop off your bag, and the sort of cold air might hit you in the sort of the winter months, and then the music starts playing and we're all running, it just completely shifts your mentality. Like I've never been to a run where I felt worse. Like it's always helped. And it just kind of gives you a bit of perspective of what's important in life. And I think having connections and feeling part of something that's bigger than yourself is just like a super nice thing to have.
And music is so important to your Tuesday night sessions. It's there from the start. And then, like you said, you stop 4 times for boot camp, which has a music of some form integrated into it.
Yes.
it can be something as traditional as like squats,
Yeah.
sit-ups,
Yeah.
other exercises. Sometimes they've been there when there's some form of dance.
So something a bit wild. Yeah.
You do group exercises, there's partner exercises. Sometimes you get 200 odd people all linking arms and doing something crazy.
Yeah.
All within central London in tiny cramped spaces.
Yeah.
This is what I think makes you more unique to other run communities out there. It's just this connection to bring people together with music, but also just fun as well. Has that been there from the start?
It has, yeah. And the doing exercises in a group is just quite a nice excuse to have a chat with someone, because if you're saying, right, well, I'm going to do some crunches whilst you do some mountain climbers, you're going to end up having a conversation. And there's so many opportunities for that. And the fact that two people have turned up to perhaps their first time at this community, that, you know, they're going to want to have a chat with a few people. And I think we do so much to break the ice, not in a corporate icebreakery kind of way, that it just feels very organic and easy. Like when I first joined, I was very, very shy, and I just kind of would stand at the back of the group and occasionally have a few chats with people. But it's completely changed who I am and like brought me out of my shell. And
let's come on to that, because that's kind of one of the reasons why you're here. Is your story, because you're now, as I said, you lead the London group, but you started just turning up. How early on in the Midnight Runner story was that when you turned up?
So it'd been going for, I think, around 3 months ish when I joined. So there was sort of 15, 20 people who would turn up.
So who were you back then? Who were you as a person?
Ooh, I was a.
Or let's start. Who were you as a runner?
Okay, as a runner, I was enthusiastic and maybe a bit ignorant about running in general and what it could be. I think I was I didn't have a GPS watch. I think I had like a red Casio watch, and running was just a way of sort of keeping fit for me. I wasn't sort of training hard for anything. Nor was I using running as a social tool. Mm-hmm. It was just kind of something to do.
How often did you run?
It didn't define my life. A couple of times, maybe 2-3 times a week.
So I think this is very similar to what how I've kind of had an attitude to running for most of my running life. My dad forced me to run when I was about 13. And then I think when I kind of got to like 15, 16, I was able to find that bug and do it off my own back without my dad
told to do it.
Yeah, being told to find it. And then since then, it's always been part of my life, but never really a big thing until recently. But I would just go out and maybe run once, twice, 3 times a week. And I never really had any stories to tell with my running. It was just, I just went out and did a run occasionally. Yeah. Did a half marathon once, and then I got a knee injury, and then I stopped running for a while, and then I came back to it, and then on the advent of parkruns, I did some parkruns, and my 5Ks got better. Yeah. But then I still ran a lot on my own. So this must have been a similar relationship to what you had at the time?
Very, very similar. Like I'd done some park runs. I'd done one half marathon, which I was very proud of. Like this felt like this thing that I would never have done before, because I had sort of corporate officey job, and I didn't really have any hobbies. I'd do the same things most weeks, and even with my running, I'd go and just do the same, run around the river. I lived sort of Battersea way, and I'd just kind of just run around. It didn't really have much meaning or purpose to me. I didn't care a ton about it. I went to, but then I had a moment. I was like, maybe I can get a bit more from it. So I chose to put in a bit more effort, and I went to an athletics club, like a running. I genuinely can't remember the name of the one I went to.
One of the traditional athletics clubs. You pay your memberships, you do your races.
Exactly. Yeah. And I turned up, and no one spoke to me, and I was looking around like sheepishly, because I was that wasn't part of Midnight Runners at the time. I was a pretty shy guy, and they said, right, we're doing laps of the park. It's about 1 kilometer, off you go, and that was it. And I just left feeling so deflated, because I didn't even feel like my expectations were particularly high. But I thought someone would be like, oh, this is a new guy, or the leader of the group or the coach or whoever would be like, is anyone here for the first time? Let's introduce you. And that just wasn't there. And so I think it's probably about a month or so later when I found out about Midnight Runners and went. And what I noticed at the start then, and something that we still do to this day, 8 years later, is at the start of every run, we say, is anyone here for the first time? And you get the show of hands, and we get the first timers together, and we brief them, and we try to integrate them with the group and get them chatting. Because if you're on this sort of shyer end of the spectrum, you've already done a big thing by making the effort to come to this, scary run group with a lot of people. So we should do everything within our power to make that next step feel as easy as possible, which is just getting you a buddy that you can just chat to, whether it's someone that's been before or another new person. And then immediately then it just like, it shares the weight of the stress of being there on your own and the unknown of what's going to happen. Like, you kind of, the camaraderie of the group that just kind of gets created at that moment. And that happened to me, and I felt sort of safe to come back the second week. And I think we do a good job of
it's great
building that.
Yeah, like you said, the importance of getting someone to return the next week. That's crucial, because it takes a lot of effort, I think, to turn up for the first week, to kind of go out your door, go meet some strangers, have an experience you're not quite sure where it's going to go, how you're going to feel. But fundamentally, you need to turn up the second and third week to actually get a sense of what it is actually about, because you might turn up and it might be a bad week, or some of the crew might not be there, and it might be disorganized perhaps. I've when I started joining different run communities, I forced myself to make sure I went 3 weeks. I was like, before I judge it, I have to go 3 different weeks, and then I'll see if it's good for me, or I want to go and find another one somewhere else.
A very balanced way of approaching it.
Yeah, which is actually exactly how I approached Midnight Runners. I turned up on my own. I'd heard about it through another running community, and I remember saying, "Oh, what's Midnight Runners?" And they're like, "Oh, they run around London with like loud music." And I was like, "That sounds amazing." And that was on the same night that I was at this other running community. So I was like, next week I'm gonna go to this one instead.
Yeah.
I was like, I've got to give it 3 goes. And the first week was amazing.
Yeah.
Absolutely brilliant. Second week, not so much.
Yeah.
Because that's sometimes on balance, just different experiences.
Yeah.
But because I forced myself for that third week, it locked it in. And I was like, right, okay, now I get it. Now I understand what this is about.
Yeah.
And then it's now part of my kind of weekly run routine, if I can.
Yeah. And it definitely isn't for everyone. Like there's still people out there who are solitary runners, and who am I or anyone to judge them for that. I think like you, I think it's good to keep an open mind and try new things, but I feel like we're almost sort of conditioned in school, and I hope the curriculum's not like that still now, but at least back when I was in school, running was never positioned as a social thing or as a team sport. It was, right, we're going to go and do laps of the field, and everyone go, oh. And it would be the worst. It would be the worst of all the sports. So the idea of doing it for fun just was so far removed from the reality that was kind of painted to us. But things have changed so much now. And you touched on earlier about how there's so many free run communities in London. And I think it's a fantastic thing, because it means there's different flavors for everyone. Like if you don't want to run with the kind of the party vibes and the music, then there's other things other than Midnight Runners that will be there for you. If you want to run fast, there's still the groups that can cater for that. If you want couch to 5K, there's those groups as well. So I think now running's kind of cool, and
it's the golden age.
It never used to be. It used to be men in string vests and short shorts, and it wasn't for everyone. But now I feel like most mornings if I'm out in the park, I see more runners than I see walkers, and it always makes me smile whenever I pass another runner. I'm like, I hope they're getting as much from it as I am.
So let's go back to your first Midnight Runner session.
Yes.
And so what made you, first of all, turn up? What got you out that door?
I'm going to be honest. It was my partner at the time who dragged me, and I was like, it starts quite late. Doesn't start.
Was she a runner?
She was, I'd say, similar to me, maybe a little more into it.
Right.
Because she was the one who entered this half marathon. I was like, I'll do it with you.
And had she been to Midnight Runners before?
she'd been 1 week before.
She'd recce'd it for you.
And of course, I'm not going that first week.
Oh, okay. Were you invited the first week when she went?
Yeah, but I chose to stay at home and
play
games on my computer.
Right.
Because that's
the type of person you were at the time.
That was a safe space. And for the record, Tom, I still occasionally dabble in some gaming on the computer if the mood is right. But yeah, I wasn't very open-minded, and I kind of liked my routine and my falafel sandwich every day for 3 years. Like, that's the kind of person I was. So yeah, she dragged me along and said, it was really good fun the first week. I think you'll like it. And after that first week I came, it did just click with me very quickly. And from that moment on, there was never any doubt that I would try to be going on Tuesday.
Right.
And not to try to do some like maths on the spot, but over 8 years, I can't have missed many Tuesdays.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always gone.
That's incredible that you got that from that first experience. Because I mean, you were saying how you were a very shy guy, standing at the back of the room. Is that because at the time you were someone who wanted to suss things out, and so you feel like over time you warmed to things, or has that changed through your experience with Midnight Runners?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think I was quite risk averse and sort of cautious. I like the things the way they are, and change is bad and scary. So I was that person who was like, just turning up was a difficult thing. But when I just realized that no one was there to judge me on how fast or slow I was, or how cool my running gear was, or whatever it might be, people were just there to have a good time. And I was like, what's not to like about this? And I think there was a little part of me that felt maybe like I had a bit of personal growth to do, to aspire to be more like, I guess, my partner at the time and others who would put themselves out there a bit more. So it definitely kind of helped me evolve as a person. And then over time, it has just completely transformed who I am. And I will actively sort of seek out how I can grow and keeping an open mind. And there might be some difficult situations, but I'm going to sort of head into them rather than just stick to kind of what I know. And I think that's probably down to the people I met in those early days and the sort of the culture that Midnight Runners was at the time, and it still is now.
Yeah, because things take time to grow and to develop, and you turn up at a group of strangers who might already know each other, and that first week they all chatting to each other. It might be the first time they've seen each other since last week, so the regulars will chat to the regulars, and you'll be the newbie just kind of trying to maybe chat to someone, and maybe someone's kind enough to chat to you, but you might come away and be like, I chatted to one person, it wasn't that interesting, and you go again, and then you see the same face, and then someone, and I think when you turn up regularly, people start to recognize you as being regular, and then that becomes easier to open conversations. Totally. And I found this with Midnight Runners because I turned up completely on my own. I knew of a friend who ran there, but she wasn't a great friend it wasn't a close friend at the time, and so she wasn't someone I could rely on to chat to in this big group. So I pretty much was off on my own. And it took me a few weeks, really. And obviously, you talk to your strangers at the beginning and you say, hey, nice to meet you, or whatever. But it took me a few weeks to actually start developing that friendship group. And then that's got wider and wider. And now it's kind of much wider. And I get to know all the regulars who go there, some of your captains as well. Yeah. But that's taken me, I think I've been involved with your group now probably about a year and a half, roughly. And so these things do take time. Yeah. For you to get something from them, but also you need to show up and put the effort in as well.
Totally.
If I only went once a month, I probably wouldn't have the same experience if I didn't go week in, week out.
Yeah. It's like any kind of habit building. I think you go for consistency over intensity first, and even if you're going every week, but as you said, you're having one conversation with someone, and it might on the surface not seem like very much, but over time, you yourself, your identity to other people changes, because rather than it being like, it's that new guy, it's like, it's that guy that I've seen every week for the last few weeks. So I think as a general guide for habit building, consistency first. And then that just makes the intensity bit easier, because that first conversation, the surroundings are familiar, like the format of the run is familiar. those other faces, some of them are familiar, which just makes it easy then to ask about someone's day or check if someone's doing all right. And that's how you start building relationships. And, you know, I back to sort of my personal experience with it. I had a very sort of small group of friends from uni, no running friends, but now I'm close with a huge number of people within the Midnight Runners group, and kind of know, I guess, acquaintances and know faces of the wider community as well. And there wouldn't be a time where I'd feel uncomfortable going to speak to any of them, and I'd hope they'd feel the same with me. And London's a big, scary place, and sometimes it can be overwhelming for even the most confident of people. And the fact that we've managed to foster this community that kind of welcomes people with open arms and a smile it does feel very special. It's not unique. I know that there's other communities that have that, but it does feel really special. And having sort of gone through it and benefited from it myself, I know we've got something good, and I feel very lucky.
So what's your story within the Midnight Runners then? So you turned up, and now you are, you lead the London team. So what's the middle bit? How did you get involved on a more regular basis, on a more official basis?
So I've been coming for 2 or 3 months as a sort of shy guy, gradually coming out of my shell a bit. And because it is, you know, first and foremost a social group, I happen to be one of the quicker runners, and purely from a logistics standpoint, not from my own personal merits, it was handy having someone who knew the route and could guide the group. So I was asked to sort of become one of we call them like the captains, or the crew captains, the crew. And, you know, I remember being like super on, and I was like, oh my
you
God,
got that armband. Was it an armband back then?
Yeah, like this C captain's armband. I was like, oh my God, what a big deal. Like imposter syndrome's kicking in. Like, what am I doing here? Like, I'm not confident. And like the guys that kind of led it, there was probably four or five of them, kind of the volunteers who would carry a speaker and shout. And I was like, wow, like, you know, who are these guys? And like, they're so confident. So yeah, but it gave me a purpose, and someone had, I guess, taken a chance on me and thought, you know, maybe this James guy will be a sort of good, I guess, ambassador for Midnight Runners. And once I had that empowered me to, I guess, grow even more as a person. So from that point on, my sort of coming out of my shell journey accelerated tremendously. And within a couple of weeks, I was sort of volunteering to kind of, you know, shout exercises and help demonstrate exercises, kind of all the things that we do as the captains on a weekly basis. And you know, you kind of have to have these like out of body experiences where you go, who am I? Like, what am I doing? Like in the office, I'm quite shy.
Yeah, because you couldn't. And
then
you
all
were
of a
this
sudden
person
you're
before,
shouting.
right? And
I know.
Now you're in the middle of central London in public, just shouting at a lot of runners and being a leader.
Yeah. So like that, becoming part of the captains, the volunteers who lead Midnight Runners felt very special. And then probably two-ish years later, the original founders sort of stepped away to do other things. So they moved to LA. They didn't have any involvement with Midnight Runners anymore. They were doing other projects. And myself and another guy, Joel, sort of picked up the mantle and led things in London. And we did that together for a time. After that, he took a sort of a paid role into Midnight Runners as an entity, because at the time we just landed this huge sponsorship deal with Reebok that meant they wanted to take the formula that we'd proven in London and deploy it in other cities. So they had sort of budget on the table, which meant they had sort of paid roles to organize Midnight Runners across the different cities, and then also launch in other cities, which would involve sort of, you know, flying out to somewhere else like Boston or Barcelona, find some people on the ground, like local people who would volunteer to help run the community. So Joel went to do that, and I picked up things sort of solely in London, and found myself heading up 17, 18 other captains, all sort of volunteers. And I still kind of pinch myself looking back at that journey. But by that point, I was a different person. Like I was so much more confident, and I could stand up in front of 200 people and talk to them. I don't prepare scripts. I don't like rehearse. I just stand up and just open my mouth and hope that the right things come out.
It's confidence, right? It's having that confidence.
And it's because you feel safe. Like I don't feel like I know that the community is not looking for me to trip up. Like they want me to introduce the run well or explain the exercise clearly or whatever it is. Like I know that they're on my side, so there's no nerves there. And I think there's a lot of sort of transferable skills and also lessons in that. Just knowing that people aren't out to get you, even at work. If you're doing a presentation, no one wants it to go badly. And when you realize that this is actually it's a conversation, it doesn't have to be so structured and rigid, and you don't have to say the exact thing. And just talk at the group, and the group responds.
That's interesting. So you mentioned how this has possibly even changed your mentality in your professional career at work. Just as do you feel like it's given you more confidence because you have this thing outside of work where you are a leader? And it's kind of translated back into the office.
Absolutely. It's made huge changes. So my job now, I work at a fintech company up in King's Cross, and I've got quite a broad role that is a lot about sort of communication, relationship building, and sort of solving problems and aligning different priorities. And there's no way I could have done that if I think back to sort of the old me, because it would be like talking to all of these people, and I don't want to talk to these people, and I don't want to face into what seems like a problem. Whereas now I just relish it, and I genuinely love it. And the opportunities I have to present, whether it's kind of internally or with clients, I admit I do prepare a bit for that, but the actual kind of moment where I'm talking and you kind of get into this flow state, it doesn't bother me. And what was really nice, coincidentally, a couple of weeks ago, my boss is actually also a runner, and I've got a lot of tangential funny stories about how we both ended up in the same team. But he said to me the other day, I've kind of been following, what you do at Midnight Runners. Like we follow each other on Strava, and he sees the runs we're doing, and he said, how can we bring more of your Midnight Runners self to work? So, which I thought was an amazing thing to hear, because it's quite a corporate company. Yeah. And he sees that I'm clearly in my comfort zone and able to lead people and be confident, and he wants more of that. And
did you say I need refreshing. A loudspeaker? I need 18.
Yeah,
18 captains.
Give me some music, and
we're all gonna be doing squats, burpees to Rihanna.
but what a attestation to the good stuff we're doing, that sort of bringing your whole self to work is again like a tangential thing, but it's a difficult line to tread, because different workplaces are different. But when you're having to adapt in the office, that's effort, that's mental strain, which makes it your work itself more difficult and makes you more tired or enjoy it less. So for me to be given almost permission to be more of my natural self, which is now my sort of, I guess, my Midnight Runners self in the office is great. And my career and my professional confidence and credibility has come on a lot, and I do put that down significantly to my role within Midnight Runners, and the not just the confidence of kind of presenting and speaking in front of the large groups, but also the leadership of the other captains. Because trying to align between 18 passionate people in either the good times or the bad, it is challenging, and sort of being diplomatic and tactful and listening and making sure that the quiet voices can be heard, not just the loud ones. Like, I didn't know about that, and I couldn't apply it in the office, but now I have learned from experience, and now I can apply it to Midnight Runners, to in the office, to my personal life, and like it's been pretty instrumental.
It sounds like you were always destined to be the head of Midnight Runners in some sense.
Maybe.
You talked about your job, your kind of normal 9 to 5. So Midnight Runners is purely a voluntary role from you and the captains.
Yeah.
Who are week in, week out the ones that lead the runs.
Yeah, that's it.
And you talked about there were, at least at the time, paid roles within Midnight Runners. If that's changed now, is it slightly?
Yeah, it
We'll
has.
come on to that in a bit. But
Yeah,
but from the London perspective, it's just
it's run by volunteers.
fully run 100% by people who give up their time, who turn up in the rain, in the cold, in the wind, or on some sunny days sometimes.
Yeah,
And they give their all every single week. So
yeah,
a lot must you must get a lot from having these captains beside
they
you.
are they are an incredible group of people, and I mean, as is the wider community, for the record. But just to kind of focus on the other captains, we have again, it's like a really diverse group, and even in that soundbite, having diverse teams in the workplace is the way to go. And weirdly, the people that disagree with me the most, the captains of Midnight Runners, are the ones who are probably the most valuable, because they're the ones that are keeping, make sure you have an open mind and having a view that isn't just an echo chamber of everyone going, oh, I agree, or, just, people who think the same as you. Like, I'm not a creative person, but there are some creative thinkers in the group. There are people who are logical and structured. There are people who are passion and energy and ideas. And I just feel very lucky to have such a great team. And I think that's why we've been so effective in London. And quite a lot of the captains have been doing it for a fair while. And they're still super enthusiastic about it. And we make a very good team. There is a lot that happens behind the scenes. We have almost like an ongoing stream of consciousness, of conversation, whether it's planning a new event or like kind of lessons learned from a Tuesday bootcamp run that perhaps didn't go as well as we'd hoped. There's always kind of a dialogue happening. And, every sort of 6 weeks or so, we'll all sit around a table and have like a big crew meeting, and we'll sort of thrash through stuff.
You just had one recently, right? This week? Because Bori, one of your new captains, Bori, was telling me that she was out on Wednesday night late with you. Was it?
Yeah.
And I mean, so you have your Tuesday sessions, and then you have, at the moment, you're doing track on Thursdays, and you're having a long run on Sundays. It seems to be your 3 major sessions of the week.
Yeah.
First one was a big commitment, but then when you think about all the back end of things with all the communication that's involved in the organization, it's a lot of commitment from your captains.
Yeah, it is. And I think the people who we've brought on, because it's all very sort of democratic, and the people that sort of stand out are the ones that have been proactive. Like you can see them sort of stepping up, or like, if there's a hazard on the pavement, they're the ones that are pointing it out, and they're just kind of aware of others. So like at least for me, someone who's proactive is a very, very important thing, and someone that has got that kind of infectious energy. And that being said, there are some kind of wild cards that can actually add a lot of value that maybe you wouldn't expect if you just kind of look at them at face value. So I think our group isn't full of big extroverts. We have some quieter people, but they're considerate, and they'll check in, and they'll always chat to new people. So there's a lot of value that the captains bring. And yeah, I feel fortunate that they all choose to give up their time, and we never want it to feel like work, but of course it is effort, and it means that your evenings are tend to fill up, and I think we're all quite busy people, but they do it with a smile, and they do it because they really care. Like the crew meetings we have, I try to keep an agenda that we stick to ish with times, but we always run over. Like there's so much that people want to talk about. There's always new ideas, or there's kind of back and forth on lots of different elements. It's because people care, and that's just such a powerful thing to turn that care into something that benefits the community. So yeah, there's definitely more than people realize that happens behind the scenes at Midnight Runners, and I think that's why it can look on most times like a well-oiled machine on the Tuesday nights, because we work well together. People aren't everyone's kind of pulling their weight, and people have got different roles and different areas where they can add value, and we just figure out how people can best contribute. And the few new captains that we've brought on recently are already contributing in different ways, and I'm super grateful to have them on the team.
They were all turning up as well already. So Bori B, Alice, and then there's the girl from Hong Kong who I didn't know much about.
Yeah, so what we try to do now, Midnight Runners, is in other cities, that we want people to remember that actually you have, it sounds a bit cliche to say family, but you have communities in other cities. And so now we're in 16 cities globally, which means
that's huge. 16.
Yeah. But that means, if you end up going to Berlin, you could say, oh, I'm from London Midnight Runners. And instantly there, people are going to talk to you, and hopefully you'd feel welcome. So Rahali, who was one of the captains in Hong Kong, obviously completely gets what Midnight Runners is about, gets the energy, and has brought it to London, and that's why she was a captain there, and that's why I think she's going to add a lot here as well.
Her energy was insane. I first came across her on the Tuesday session, and I was watching her during the before we did a boot camp exercise, when you kind of get there, and if you get there early, you do a few little exercises. She was going double time. I couldn't understand where she got the energy from.
Yeah.
I'm excited about a new influx of captains and how that's going to be going forward.
Yeah.
Is it a constant? Are you constantly trying to source new people? Are people kind of having their time in the Midnight Runners?
It's a really interesting question, and something in sort of my role as leading it, I've thought a lot about, and I still do, and I don't think there's a perfect answer for it, because for me it's a bit of a balancing act between the continuity of having a team that can work well together because they understand each other, their strengths and weaknesses, and how best to work, but then also bringing in fresh ideas. The main thing that I want, and actually everyone should be aware of this who's involved in Midnight Runners, is that, being a captain is not a promotion. There's not a hierarchy. You're there to serve the community. So you end up sort of kind of putting in more effort than the community in your role. But it's also not forever. So if it ever got to the point where it was feeling like, oh, this is a bit of a strain or a chore, we'd encourage people to sort of take a step back. And we've got some old captains who still come every week on Tuesday, but that's their relationship with Midnight Runners has changed now because they're just one of the community. They didn't have the headspace or the time or other priorities, and that's totally fine. It's not this, you don't have to kind of break away. So I think in an ideal world, it would be kind of more of a fluid thing. But I think all of the captains are keen to be involved and still feel they have value to add. So I think for me, just having those regular checkups, just as human to human, I don't have like a performance improvement plan like I'd have in the office with people in teams who aren't performing. It's just, for me, it's communication, like understanding what they have going on. Like if they've got a couple of weeks where things are crazy at work, just let me know, and then I'm not going to expect you to kind of be there or bring in the same level of energy. We're all human, and I understand that Midnight Runners should never be anyone's top priority, because we know, as you say, we're doing this as volunteers, and in order to keep that relationship as harmonious as possible, it should feel like play, it should feel like fun. If you're planning a next event, it's because you should be passionate about that event, not because you feel obliged to do it. So if I ever got to that point where someone, like I sensed or they told me that the relationship wasn't quite at that level, that will probably be an indicator for them to take a step back, even if it's for 6 months and they end up coming back. But
I guess this is where having diverse people and having a large group of people is helpful, because you don't need everyone to turn up every week to put on the show, but you need to make sure that you have people to cover all the time.
Yeah.
I have this dream.
Tell me about your dream.
Currently living in London, and I've been involved in various running communities, some like trail communities, some like road running communities, Midnight Runners as well. And I would love to put on my own running community one day. Probably not in London. Don't feel like I could have a place for it. But one day when I move out, maybe to some coastal town, I feel like I could bring the experience that I've had in these few years in London to somewhere and make it exciting and develop my own community in a place which maybe needs it. And a lot of what I've experienced from Midnight Runners would make the basis of that, about making sure that at least one run of the week, it's that fun party vibe where there's music, where there's some kind of group activity, where it feels like you're almost dancing, but at the same time you're doing your strength and conditioning work. But And so I've been experiencing all these communities with very open eyes, seeing how they all operate. And so my dream is to one day have something like that.
I will hold you accountable to that, as will this podcast. That soundbite there. remind me.
I'll tell you actually,
5 years.
I'll
from
go
now.
into detail while we're on it.
Let's
I
do
want
it.
it to be based. I want to own a bakery
Okay.
in a coastal town.
Is it called Buns and Runs?
It won't be called Buns and Runs. No, it'll be based loosely on the Dusty Knuckle in East London.
Yeah,
If you know that,
I
place.
do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I worked above that office, and so I've had many of their sandwiches, and I love sourdough. The dream would be to have that as a business, but we're not open for many hours. But the bakery would still be operating, so it could be a great bag drop place. It could also be a great community space.
Logistics not to be overlooked.
Yeah, perhaps to be somewhere where there could be some yoga space, like a little kind of studio, maybe something that you could just. So on the days that you aren't running, you could still get the community together to do something together.
Yeah.
So I want that hub, that space, but then I want to make sure that people can come to it. And so like at least weekly, there's like 2, 3, 4 things that people could be doing
Yeah.
based from this bakery. But then we go run off, and then we all come back and eat good food and drink. And
I join your running community, Tom.
don't know what it's going to be called yet, but there's going to be a Midnight Runners style party run every single week. And that will be inclusive for all. But then there'll be like maybe the trail runs on the weekends.
Yeah.
Maybe like the Couch to 5K or something to get people feeding into the series. Even like beginners trail running as well, which I think is to kind of lead people and get people on confidence onto trails, because trail running is, I think, something that people kind of shy away from because they think that they don't know what to do. But actually, with a little bit of guidance, people can develop the confidence to be able to go off onto the trails themselves.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. I was actually sat on my way to the run this morning. There's two ladies sat on the train opposite me, and I could tell they were runners because you immediately clock running shoes anywhere in public. And they were talking about trail running and how they didn't really know how to get into it. And they were like, oh, well, I've been running in these Brooks shoes, and like I just keep slipping, and I was rolling my ankle, but like I've got this nice woodland near where I live, and I don't think sort of trail running had quite propagated into their running world. So it's just this kind of big unknown. But actually, all you need is a pair of slightly grippier shoes, and then you can go and explore and not worry about pace and be a bit closer to nature. And I completely agree with you that it should be kind of more accessible. And actually, the barriers to entry are still pretty low, just like regular running.
Yeah, it's just having someone who can guide you.
Yeah,
really. Shoes obviously help, but actually, I think if it's summer trails, if it's dry trails, you don't go with any shoes. You just need someone who has the experience of like maybe route planning and little things like making sure you've got a jacket or something if the weather changes, little things like that. But trails don't have to be like going into mountains. They could just be going off piste in your local park.
Yeah,
and just getting used to the terrain that's under your foot. That's slightly different than tarmac.
Yeah.
Anyway, I digress. That was my dream.
I like the dream. Would it be wrong for me to say that I have a similar one, but rather than a bakery, it would be a coffee shop?
Nice.
Or maybe like a bike repair shop. I feel like that'd be quite a.
It could be
nice
just like a hub of all of them in like a little kind of back end of a.
Actually, yeah, because if you've got coffee, you'd want some baked goods as well.
Coffee, the bakery, the bike shop, and then a little brewery.
Oh, the trifecta.
Which actually, in the Dusty Knuckle area, there's a brewery, there's a barbecue place. They do coffee, and then around the back end, there's a bike shop. I mean, that would be a great hub anyway. Maybe I'll get in contact with them. But why I came onto my dream is because of what I've really appreciated is how much I would need a team of people to do that. I couldn't do this anything on my own. So it'd be about having the idea, having the passion, and saying, look, I really want to set something up, and having no expectations so that it starts small. If it's just like 5 people going for a run one week, and we do it the next week, and then the next week, and then maybe they can bring their friends along. And anyone who turns up multiple times be like, right, do you want to get involved and start making this a bigger thing?
Yeah.
Be part of a crew. And then within a year, then the whole community is involved, right?
Yeah.
That's the dream.
Yeah.
But it takes you to have people who are also keen and passionate to put their time in.
Yeah.
for that to happen. And I think with Midnight Runners, having 200 people turn up on a Tuesday night in central London, you couldn't do that if it's just you on your own or with another person. You need that team of people there because it's just not physically possible for you.
Definitely agree. And I think in terms of sort of building it from the ground up with smaller numbers, it's hard not to be energized when you see passion from people. Like if someone was telling me about, I don't know, their collection of wooden spoons, but if they were like really, really passionate about these wooden spoons, like look at the veneer on this one and this one's got this different shaped handle, and like I can see myself getting like, this person's onto something. Maybe I need to get more wooden spoons in my life. Like if people are passionate, it gives energy. And obviously with Midnight Runners and other groups, when we're all passionate about running and the community, the energy is just everywhere, and it's hard not to get kind of sucked into it.
So I want to talk about some of the logistics. If anyone is out there and they want to set up their own running community, we know that they need to have a team of people, but also we know that they don't have to start as big as you are now, and that it actually grows. It starts with a small group of people, and then it can become hundreds within a few years if it wants to go in that direction. But what does it physically take? And or what I want to talk actually about maybe some problems or legalities you might have had. Within the City of London, there are, you'd think, public places, but actually they're not. They're private places.
So much private land. Yeah.
And it seems that you've had your fair share of run-ins with security over time. Just because when we stop for a boot camp, we're in a place for 10 or 15 minutes as 100 or 200 people.
Yeah.
Just doing some exercises and then we move on. But not everyone takes that as kindly as you might hope.
Yeah.
What are the legalities of something like that?
Yeah, it's quite a difficult one. And I think we've been probably on balance quite fortunate about how things have gone down over the 8 years. And we've not had any serious problems. It's usually just been a conversation and things have been sorted out. I think I understand that the private land that maybe we run through or we'd stop at, if you were having a big event, you couldn't just use the land without prior permission. But because it's quite a fleeting moment, as you said, sort of 10 minutes or so, and then we're there, it usually isn't a problem that is kind of persists. When we've had conversations with security, usually it goes on along the lines of, "Wow, we love what you're doing, but you can't stay here too long." And then we say, "Right, sorry, we actually probably going to be another 3 or 4 minutes, and then we're gone." And then the problem is gone. I think some of these problems are unique to the way that we do our runs with the boot camp stops, which does mean that there is a large group congregated in a space, but it's hard to find sort of safe places for so many people to run. That's why we stick to the river. We run away from the roads. There's not kind of dangerous traffic light crossings, or we were trying to keep the group as safe as possible. And in terms of stopping for the exercises, obviously we need ideally as wide open space as we can. I think what we try to sort of brief within the captains and also to the community and the first timers is just be respectful of the city we're in, and watch out for pedestrians. And if we're all running across a narrow bridge, there could be people there with buggies or dogs or someone up with a tripod taking a nice time-lapse shot, and who are we to get in their way or knock their camera? So we do need to be aware. And I think there's been times where the energy's just been high, and there might have been a problem, or someone's tripped over, or someone's knocked someone, and we just need to kind of remind people that we don't own the streets. We are coexisting with everyone else in London. And I hope that it is a net positive thing. I'm confident it is a net positive thing. And for the people who've gone, "Oh, I don't like that loud music," hopefully that's just an inconvenience for the 20 seconds as we run past, rather than it being something that's going to ruin their day. In terms of, I guess, other lessons learned, we have insurance that covers kind of any accidents or injuries. And I guess just as kind of good practice, most of the captains, we did granted it was a while ago now. I don't know if these things expire. I should probably check that. But we have there's a run leader course that UK Athletics put on. I remember when I went to it a few years ago, they were talking about, so you might get sort of 10 people, and this is how you work with a group. And in the back of my mind, I'm going, we have 20 times that.
Wow.
But I think what I'm kind of proud of what we have achieved over the years, which is just the kind of the risk assessment and how we think about the runs and kind of the stuff that happens on the fly has just become quite second nature, of just sort of shepherding that many people. So yeah, fortunately we haven't had any major incidents or accidents.
So you're run leader qualified. This is something you've done a while ago.
Yeah, so it's not a run coach. So there's a run coaching qualification.
Yes.
Which is more about the technique and the sort of the training aspect. I've done a few modules of that, but I'm not a qualified run coach. But there is a qualification called a leader in running fitness, which does provide guidance on even the basics, like just having a first aid kit, which we keep in one of our sort of backpack speakers, and just how best to work with a group. And they also talk about doing warm-ups and cool-downs, which actually we do. So although we're not a super serious athletics club, we do a warm-up every week. We do a cool-down every week. So there are some things that are just, good practice in terms of leading a running community. But I think, again, this is kind of where maybe the distinction of an athletics club and a community, because in an athletics club for UK athletics, you need a treasurer. You need to understand the
So
addresses
old
and
school,
details
isn't it?
of all of your runners. You kind of need, you need to pay subs, and there is a lot of things, and we've looked into it before, and we decided not to go down that route. So yeah, I mean,
I think that's such an old-fashioned way of doing things, and it's not to say anything bad about athletics clubs out there. They have their place, but I've found just turning up to be the best thing that you can do with running communities, and you'll always be welcomed with open arms. If they're a free running community, then there's no questions asked. You turn up and you fit in.
Yeah,
I think there becomes a lot of more problems with athletics clubs where it's like, okay, you can come for a few sessions, but then you're gonna have to start paying your fees.
Yeah,
we want you to run in the club kit, and it becomes these kind of barriers which have stopped me in the past from turning up. I like the fact that there's some running communities out there in London that I know of, but I've never been to. And then tomorrow, and if one was tomorrow, I could just rock up and turn to it. And I wouldn't have to think about whether or not I actually wanted to commit to them, and just be like, I'm going to come try you out. And if I like you, I'll come again. And I know that I can do that without any hierarchy or any kind of paperwork.
Yeah. And I think it's that kind of mentality is quite deep in running. I think there's some ways that I'm sure it's probably a good thing to have a bit of structure. But even with my championship place to London, there's a whole load of rules that come with that.
You need an athletics club.
So I just arbitrarily just picked a club, paid the thing.
Fees,
so then I could put that as like an ID number to register. But then it said, you've got to run in club kit, and the club kit has to look like this. And I was just there with a t-shirt that said Midnight Runners on it. And when I went in, they're checking your name and your kit. And I was so nervous that the guy would turn me away because my club kit didn't have a logo top right or whatever it might be. And the branding, the sort of sportswear brand smaller than X. And it was fine.
But you got away with it. You got an elite place as a Midnight Runner.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was nice. But I just want to say, I think there's no, I've never loved the saying, it's easy to ask for forgiveness than to ask for permission. It doesn't quite sit with me. I am more of a sort of a rule following governance kind of guy, but I do think that for something that is a sort of a passion project and a community, I wouldn't want people to feel like there are barriers to getting that started. And kind of learning by doing is probably the fastest way to learn. And yes, you might run into bumps into the road, and that's where you adapt, and then you figure out what you need. So like, of course, like we have insurance now. Did we have it on the very first run before I joined? Probably not.
Right. Yeah.
And do licenses and other things need to be renewed? They probably do, but I think it's probably a balancing act between, how serious you want to take it, how much time you have to give to it, what is your responsibilities as a leader to do things by the book. How much you agree with the book. There's a lot there, and I think everyone will have to make their own judgment on it. And I think we're close-ish to getting the balance right with Midnight Runners, I think.
You mentioned previously you were doing some modules of the coaching qualification. Is that something you're going to follow through? Or is it something that will kind of be part of your life maybe in the future?
Yeah.
Because I this week I turned up to one of your track sessions, the first Midnight Runners track sessions I've been to, because they're mostly in East London, which is where you're based. I'm Southwest London. For a once in a blue moon, you had a pop up in Southwest London at Battersea Track, and I thought I've got to make the effort to go, especially before this podcast. And I'm so glad I did, because I got to experience you as a coach and I saw you in a different light than I actually see you in Midnight Runners. I see you very confidently in Midnight Runners, but that's like you're in control of like a massive crowd. You've got your team around you, and sometimes like I can be at the back of the crowd and I'm not quite listening and maybe chatting to someone else, and you can kind of fall back into that role. But when I went to the track session, it's a much smaller group, and so you have to be attentive, have to listen. Because Coach James is there. And you were so confident, and you put on a great track session. I've been attending track now with Adidas runners for again about a year and a half, and they put on great track sessions. I really enjoy them. Always great fun, always great community, and very well structured. And so it was nice to actually go to a track session that was coached by someone completely different with different things. A lot of it was similar about the warm up and the dynamic stretching, and then the session. But it was also just interesting just to see how someone else would approach that. Is this something you really enjoy? It seems like it is.
Yeah, it's kind of been my baby for a while. I think I've been doing track sessions for Midnight Runners for over 5 years now. So it's a couple of years since it had been sort of started and I'd been part of the community. I was heading down to the track to probably train for Budapest or whatever it was at the time. And I said, other people can come along if they want. And because I was one of the faster runners, they assumed that I had some knowledge. And then gradually over time, it just kind of became a standard event that we had every week. And I just want to flag that this isn't, I don't think what Midnight Runners represents is quite encapsulated by the track sessions. And I wouldn't want people to think that Midnight Runners is super serious because we offer it. But for me, it's like, how can I give back to the community? If the community wants these sessions and I'm happy to do it, why would we not offer it? Is just another bit of value add. And I do get a lot from the sessions. I love leading them. I love interacting with a smaller group that can be a bit more personal.
You knew everyone by name.
I knew most
and
of the people.
That must be a great feeling, just turning up to a group, just knowing you can be like, oh, hey, Richard, how you doing? And or David, what's
and also I think when people are working hard, they like to know that someone's noticed them, that they've turned up. But I feel incriminating myself by saying I'm not a qualified running coach, and I want to be respectful of that, and that the people that are proper coaches and they know these things inside out are always the professional choice is best. If you injure yourself, you go see a physio. You don't just foam roll by watching YouTube videos. It's
pretty much how I do things these days.
But again, this is kind of coming back to the balancing act. So I spent a lot of time sort of doing my own learning about running when I realized that it isn't just putting one leg in front of the other. There is a bit more sort of technique to it. And I was keen to, run smarter, not harder, and not get injured, and learn more about the efficiency. So I spent hours and hours on YouTube and reading stuff and looking at guides. And I did a few of the coaching modules, and the official ones, and it just didn't quite speak to me to sort of follow through with it. But what was probably the most transformational, and why I felt, and why I to this day feel comfortable leading the track sessions from my own moral standpoint of not being a qualified run coach, is I won this competition on Instagram, like a luck-based competition that the company Soar was doing. So Soar Running, they make very nice running gear based in London.
Brand, right?
Yeah, small brand based in London. it's all sort of quite high performance gear, sort of focused more on people that take running a bit more seriously and want their gear to sort of perform well. And they were doing a 6-8 week coaching plan with like 2 GB coaches, and it was all building towards a mile sort of time trial. So it was one coaching session a week with these 2 coaches, and they'd teach us stuff. We'd run some hard miles, and then at the end they had a mile time trial. And man, it was just, I was absorbing it like a sponge. I remember even just like making notes on my phone. So the structure of the sessions that I run at track follows the exact same structure that these 2 guys taught me. Like 5-6 years ago. And interestingly, I still sometimes see them at Mile End in East London. I'll see Barry, this old timer coach with 2 stopwatches around his neck and a whistle, clipboard with times on. I remember him shouting at me on the track, and the drills that we do are the drills that they taught me. So if it's good enough for GB athletes, and it coached me at the time to get a good mile time, it's good enough for the Midnight Runners community. So I think, that is what I pin sort of my coaching in inverted commas experience on.
Because you were leading the session on your own. There was Bori and B, the 2 captains were there, but purely really to kind of be part of the community. Probably there's maybe 25 of us there, 30 maybe, odd. You were leading the session, coaching people, but also literally running the same session as well.
Yeah, got to eat your own dog food.
Eating your own dog food, miles ahead of everyone. It was incredible to see you go. We started with some 800 reps.
Yeah,
and I was really curious because I think I'm so comfortable in my Adidas running track sessions, I kind of know where I sit. Typically, I mostly can be one of the fastest people there. Depending on like who, maybe there's 5 other people who might be as fast as me or faster, but it depends on whether they're running fast that week or whether they turn up that week. So I feel very confident about just kind of like blitzing off at the front.
Yeah.
And then I was like, all right, okay, new track session, new people. Where am I going to fit in? And I kind of fit in kind of maybe in the top 10. I think,
towards the front.
Yeah,
for sure.
Towards the front for sure. But not as close to the front as I'm used to. You were miles away. There was 2 other people at least who were kind of in a league of their own. I was working with a few of the guys, and I think we mostly kept together, and then one of them dropped off near the end of the sets. It's incredible to see you. I think at the end of the 800, I think you probably were about 100 meters away from me the first rep, and then obviously after time with all our breaks, you were then going, essentially putting another lap on people. But it looked effortless. Did it feel like that?
Thank you, Tom. I wouldn't say effortless, but this is why I think I'm a firm believer of how helpful the track sessions can be, and what I took away from that initial sort of 6-8 weeks with Barry and the other guys called Matt Yates, and what they taught me, because I have been doing this most weeks now for sort of 5 odd years, and I haven't ever had any bad injuries really, or been out of running, and I think you just get so in tune with your body, and I'm not always the fastest person there usually, but if that works as a kind of proof in the pudding, what's the phrase?
Proof's in the pudding.
The proof's in the pudding. Am I the pudding in this scenario? I don't know.
You're the proof and the pudding.
Okay, maybe this analogy doesn't really work, but yeah, like I do the session, and I lead the session, and I do sort of follow my own advice, and when I'm on my runs, I think about the little corrections that you can do to your form and your technique.
I learned so much from what you were doing in the drills at the beginning about the arms, not putting the arms forward too much. It's all about pushing them back, little things like that. And in the drills, I was switching on to like what I felt like I needed to do, and then I was taking that into the run session. So
Perfect.
From someone who's been doing track for a year and a half, I'd learned so much just from a different point of view and a different perspective.
Oh, I'm really glad, because I'm a firm believer that although there is value in it, if people really want to take it to the next level, having like their own coach, a professional, is like a kind of one-on-one who can give you a training plan and give you corrections is undoubtedly the best way to go. But I think for the general masses, there's a lot of ways that you can actually just improve yourself if you know how to do it. So again, for me, it's just empowering people to be able to sort of self-correct when they're on their run. And it's like, maybe they're getting tired after half an hour, and it's remembering to keep that posture good and keeping their chest up and their shoulders back. And that's something that everyone can learn, however fast or slow you are, however new to running. They're just principles that apply to everyone.
You're right. So much is within yourself already.
Yeah.
You can unlock.
Exactly.
I think
it's purely a knowledge thing.
Yeah, people do think, oh, I'll pay for a coach, or when January comes along, I'll join this running club where we'll be coached and I'll be given a training plan and they can fix me. And they throw money at it. And actually, one of the things I love about running communities is that you can still have all that without it costing anything.
Yeah.
And you can come across amazing people like yourself who are willing to give up their time and give back to a community and say, well, I can use my experience and knowledge and I can help improve you.
Yeah. But I mean, let's be clear. This is definitely a two-way thing, because I'm getting a lot from these track sessions. I really love it. And
in terms of what? In terms of your fitness? In terms of actually just doing a session?
No. Just in terms of just getting back from the community.
Yeah.
It gives me a buzz, and it just makes me. It just puts a smile on my face in a different way to the Tuesdays, because it's a bit more intimate.
Okay.
And I genuinely feel like this is a very balanced sort of value exchange between hopefully the knowledge that I'm giving and how I'm feeling from these sessions. And that's why I've been doing it and like giving up my free time, because it works for me.
Yep.
And yeah, the running, my sort of running improving is great as well. And like you asked me earlier, did it feel effortless? The running itself kind of does. Of course, the fitness in your legs and your breathing, your cardio always catches up with you in the end. But I think kind of getting your technique into a good place where you actually can sort of just sustain it and you're not going to do yourself any kind of injuries is a good place to get. And then just understanding, engaging your different muscles in different ways and just being kind of tuned into how they're feeling. People follow training plans to the letter and get injured because they don't listen to their body. But if you've never been taught to listen to your body and understand kind of what the different muscles are doing and how to use them. I mentioned on the session on Thursday that ideally at the end of a track session, everything should ache kind of equally. You shouldn't feel a particular strain in a calf or a quad or a hamstring or a shoulder or whatever it might be. It should be a general ache because you've engaged everything. And it just takes a bit of time to learn that. And then once you've kind of got it in, then running can be this lifelong hobby. People say running's bad for your knees. It doesn't have to be. Bad technique's bad for your knees. Running, you see people running into their 80s, 90s. And, we have some older people that run with us at Midnight Runners on the Tuesday nights. And some have come to the track session, some have come to the Sunday runs. It's great to see that they love running and they've been doing it their whole life.
Yeah. Technique is fundamental. For a good friend of mine, John, who's a great runner, put it really well to me once. It's like you have to learn how to run, because people think they can just run. And they go and run, and they run a bit further, they run a bit faster, and then they run because it's just running, right? But it's not. And it's like you learn how to walk and you learn how to swim. And sometimes, you go to swimming lessons and you pay and and you learn your technique and you become a better swimmer.
Yeah.
You can't just usually swim. So you have to do the same thing with running.
Yeah.
You have to learn the technique. And if you can learn the technique, it can make you a much better runner. And like you said, it can give you less injuries along your time. Most injuries, I would say, are either overuse of too much effort or just bad technique. And
completely agree.
If you're compounding that over time with a bad, with leaning forward too much, maybe, or but if that's compounded over time with every step that you take, it's going to catch up with you at one point.
Yeah.
But that can be corrected, and it just takes little small things. You were on about on the track session about you're not. I'll give the example of the arms. It's not about like making a huge difference. It's making that 5% difference.
Yeah.
And if you can just change your technique just 5%, that will translate into you being a better, more efficient runner.
Yeah. And there's the small tweaks like I've seen from some of the kind of the more regular people that come to the track sessions, how they've improved over the time. And then they're usually the ones that also don't get injured as much. And it is kind of nice to see. It's a bit of a blessing and a curse sometimes, because you can be out and and I don't want to be that kind of annoying person, but you see some running the other side of the road, and you're like, oh, come on, just drive your arms that a bit more, and you kind of find yourself just like noticing these things. But that awareness is actually a very good thing, because then in your own running, and people you feel comfortable saying to correct. I'd say running with a loved one is always difficult, because you want to be a supportive partner. You don't want to be the person that's always saying, come on, drive your arms, put your head up.
Yeah.
So that is certainly a situation
You've touched on something there, actually, because it's always easy to critique someone else, because you can see them. You can't always see yourself and the mistakes that you're making in life or in running.
Well,
but the mistakes that someone else is doing running next to you, it's clear to see.
Yeah.
And all you want to do as a nice, kind person is tell them, oh, you're leaning forward too much. Actually lean back, and then the whole frame of your body. And that's how you... Yeah, when it comes with a partner, there's a very particular way of doing that, saving the time as well.
Yeah, my answer to that, what I think I found has worked, is at the start of the run I say, is this a training run? And the answer is 9 times out of 10, no. So we're on a social run, I keep my mouth shut, we have a nice time. If on that odd time it is a training run, and she's trying to work on the technique or maybe run a bit faster, then I can give her all the little corrections that I like, and I think that works. But trying to share knowledge and make people get more from running is, I find that quite hard to turn off.
I mean, clearly you have a great technique, but has someone ever come to you and say, "Oh, what you're doing there is a bit weird"?
Yeah, it was Barry, so Mr. Stopwatches, back when I did that competition, that training sort of thing with Saw. Yeah, he was a abrupt man, very firm on, come on, pick your feet up, and like, why are you dragging yourself like this, and why are you hunching over? And it just kind of drilled it out of me quite quickly. I don't think that's the right approach, and that doesn't feel like a very Midnight Runners approach for the sessions.
But that particular place was the time and a place to do that. Like Barry, the coach, you were willing to be corrected in a sense.
Exactly.
You don't want to turn up on Midnight Runners and someone say, "You're doing this wrong."
Yeah.
Unless it's going to be dangerous.
Yeah.
Let's talk about your Midnight Runners community. You talked about how you love track because you just give back to the community. You turn up, you know everyone's name, and everyone knows your name, which must make you feel great to kind of turn up knowing that you just have this group of people who is just your friendship base, and it's just something that you're passionate about, with like-minded people who are also passionate about getting fit, doing exercise, having fun together. If we take that to the wider Midnight Runners community on a Tuesday session, which is a much larger group, you probably won't know everyone's name there, but you are the face of Midnight Runners, and you turn up, and most people will probably know who you are roughly. What does that community give to you? How has that made you feel over the years as that's grown, as you've grown into this position, into the role that you're in now?
Oh, just so much. It's almost my identity, like more than anything else, that's for sure. Like my job and what my job means to me, either the industry, the particular company, the people I work with, is so much lower down what makes me who I am, or even just me as a runner is lower down than Midnight Runners as an entity and what it means to me. And we had some tumultuous times at the end of 2022, which kind of was shaking up Midnight Runners as
let's
thing.
talk about that. What happened? What was happening at that time?
There was a little bit of a change in direction of where Midnight Runners should go, led by the original founders who'd been away for a while. And
this was a result of losing Reebok as a sponsor, was it?
That had a role to play. So Reebok, due to that they were sold by Adidas Group to some other entity, and they just needed to restructure how they did business. So they actually cut ties, not just with Midnight Runners, but also with CrossFit and UFC and a huge brand, Les Mills, that were way, way, way bigger than Midnight Runners, way more global established entities. So it wasn't due to a sort of failing of Midnight Runners fulfilling anything that we were doing with Reebok. It was just an unfortunate circumstance. But yeah, that did lead to sort of some proposed changes in terms of how the organisation was run. And I don't, there's no sort of bad blood, at least from my side, from how kind of everything went down. I think it was more of a communication and transparency issue, which actually is probably a wider point for life, like just over communicate in doubt, if in any doubt. And then you could usually resolve problems before they become problems. But I think what had happened was we were told, like, this is what's happening. And when something's been your baby for, in my case, 8 years, and these people have been away from it for 5+ years, we as a sort of a collective of the captain of the volunteers, all 18 of us, we just felt tremendously uncomfortable with what was proposed.
And so it's almost like the direction was being set for you on a different track.
Yeah, and it wasn't something that we agreed with, didn't align with our values. I'd rather not get into the sort of the specifics of what it was, but
you like you mentioned, you and the captains, you are the ones that are there week in, week out, putting on these sessions, doing it the way that's a set way, and then suddenly it was going in a completely different direction. It meant that you weren't comfortable leading this new direction, right?
Exactly, and I think also the way that sort of, I guess, our contributions were valued or not valued just made us feel uncomfortable doing anything to sort of support that going forward. So it just kind of put us in a bit of an uncomfortable situation where the Midnight Runners brand, or like what it was going to represent, or the people that were involved in it, who were receiving financial gain from it, whilst us as volunteers were not. It just, I guess they'd almost burnt the bridge in that respect. But it was an incredibly difficult time because Midnight Runners wasn't only my identity. I'd say it's probably heavily tied to the identity of all of the captains. Some of them had been doing it for as long as I have. Some of them have been doing less, but it meant a huge amount. So the idea of walking away from a huge part of you was just a gut-wrenching prospect. And we had endless late night calls in the evening. We'd either meet in person, we'd jump on a Zoom call and try to figure out, like, how do we plot a course through this? And it was just incredibly difficult to know what was right. And I felt a lot was on my shoulders as the kind of lead to chart a course, but I also didn't feel like I had it wasn't my right to say, this is what we should do, this is what we shouldn't do. So I tried to take more of a back seat and just listen and sort of consolidate the ideas, and we'd have discussions, and we'd even vote on a few things of points. And I tried to be a facilitator for the outcome that was right for the group. And I learned a lot about leadership and just how to deal with difficult situations in that time, particularly making sure that it was a balanced outcome. Like, nothing's black and white. And I think in general, it's very easy to assume that someone has bad intentions, but in reality, it's probably just misaligned, or you're not aware of all of the facts. So I think, making sure we didn't do anything drastic and there was no like names being dragged through the mud. Things were we tried to keep things kind of above board, and we just, sort of said as little as we needed to say, but the sort of, the statement or the intent was clear, and just making sure I listened.
So did you make the decision en masse to leave Midnight Runners?
Yeah, and that's where we ended up. So
that must have been very difficult to, as a decision to make for something that's been, like you said, a part of your identity for so long, with the community of people that you've grown to love over the years and are now a big part of your life and your friendship groups. To say that you are stepping back completely from that would have been a very difficult choice to make. To actually come out and say, this is it. This is the end for me. Now I'm having nothing to do with Midnight Runners in its new form, in the direction it's going to go.
Yeah, I remember this memory so vividly.
Did you make a decision and then the captains followed, or was it a collective decision to all leave together?
It was a unanimous decision that we all voted on anonymously, and that was the result of it.
So you and there's about 18
About
or so,
18 or so,
18 or so
yeah.
captains en masse left Midnight Runners,
Yeah.
leaving it without any person to run it at all in London.
Yeah, so there was a couple of sort of paid employees of Midnight Runners who would have to have stepped in to deal with the London community.
Yeah, which is huge because we've talked about this and how you need those people on the ground, the big team of people to make sure that you can put this on, because you can't put this on without that number of people to be involved, to be passionately be involved, to be excited to turn up week in, week out, rain, wind, snow.
Yeah, it wasn't something we took lightly.
So you had your last week at Midnight Runners back in the end of 2022.
Yeah, it was around October time.
I missed that session. I wasn't in London, I think, at the time. I heard a lot about it, which meant the next week, Midnight Runners had to find some people to run it with that, or was it not going to run?
Yeah, I was at work when we sort of made the big decision to walk away. We must have spent 3-4 hours up the night before, like late into the night, collaboratively working on a Google Doc that was the letter to the founders to say that this was our decision. And we'd all agreed that we were okay. We were happy with the stance we'd taken, the like how we'd worded it. It was an intense night. And next day I was in the office, and I remember copying because I was trying to do it all on my phone. I can't get onto sort of Gmail on my work laptop. I was on my phone in this little sort of box room for taking calls in the office. And I was copying email addresses of all of the 18 or so captains to sort of CC them into this email in reply to the founders. And my hands are shaking and I'm all over the place, and sort of pressing send on that letter, on that message to them was awful. And I just started crying in the office, in this meeting room. I was like, what have I done? Like, this is just such an awful situation. And I was just in pieces. It was one of the lowest points of my life. And I know my friends who I've told about subsequently, like, it's just running, James. It's just a running group. Why does it matter? But I can't describe to them, and you've probably got a sense of it. It was just truly awful. And we met up all after work that day, and we were all just, again, it's the same. We was quiet. Like there was no energy. There was all the things that we normally see in abundance with one another just wasn't there. We were just shells of people, and that lasted for a while. And to kind of bring back to your question of kind of, well, what happened? We knew that we still wanted to provide what we were offering.
This is the thing. So as someone who is part of the community, I learned about the news rather shockingly, because it all kind of happened quite quickly. And it seemed that the Midnight Runners stance at the time, after you left, was like, well, we're going to find some more people to run it.
Yeah.
And I think there was a phrase that was used in some of their correspondence that said something in the lines like, it's not the captains who make Midnight Runners, it's the community. And my response at the time was, no, it's all about the captains who make it. It's because it's like we've said, it's you guys who turn up week in, week out, no matter what the weather, and put on the show for us. Obviously, like having 100 or so, 200 people around kind of makes it great as well. If it was just 10 people, it might not have the same thing. But I knew from the experience that I had that I go to Midnight Runners knowing that your captains are going to put on a great show. They're going to lead something. They're going to make it exciting. They make it feel inclusive and welcoming. And so my allegiance was, well, what are the captains doing now? What's James doing now? Because that's where I'm going to follow, because Midnight Runners was just a name for what you put on. And the Midnight Runners name could be anything. It was all about you guys and the people who put it on week in, week out.
Thank you.
And I think the week after your last Midnight Runners run, you just turned up at the same place. I told some people you were doing it on the same Tuesday time session. And I that's the one I turned up to during this whole period. And I'm glad I did. I feel like there was probably at least 200 people there on that night. And that wasn't a Midnight Runners official thing.
Yeah.
You called yourself, was it when we run again?
Yeah.
Kind of temporary name.
Like a placeholder.
Placeholder name to see, look, we're going to continue. We don't know what it's going to be at this moment, but if you want to meet up as a social run, we're going to be here at this time. Come join us. And the fact that you had so many people turn up to that.
God, yeah, that was an emotional night.
It really puts in how much the community values you.
Yeah. Yeah.
That must have been an incredible feeling. Turning up, not knowing exactly what's going to happen. It was a very tumultuous time for you. You'd just gone through a very stressful period. You didn't know what the future was going to be. But all you knew is this, I'm going to carry on doing what I know and love, and that's going to put on a great session for some people if they want to come.
Yeah.
So when you turned up on that session, how did that make you feel?
I remember having this kind of mental quandary where I was sort of announcing to the group and just talking. And you're always thinking, well, like, there's almost like a bit of like self-preservation. Like, I don't want to break down in front of these people and start crying, but also... And then the other part of me is going, but that's how I'm feeling. And I feel like I'm in a safe space. If I'm going to start welling up and my voice is going to crack a bit, it's not fake. I'm just giving them the real self. Even now, talking about it now, I can feel myself getting emotional. Because I remember standing up and just saying how grateful we were that everyone was there. And it meant so much to us. Because we have been putting in the work for so long and we really do care. And yeah, the name was great, but it wasn't everything. So yeah, I spoke to the group. I did break down a bit, and there was there were tears, but it was all because I feel so strongly about the community, and I'm glad I didn't try to sanitize that, because I wouldn't have been truthful to myself or to them if I tried to turn this into like we'll just brush it off and we'll just carry on and like, we're going to be called table runners, whatever it might be. Like, that wouldn't be representative of the pain we've gone through and this connection that we feel with the community. And I think it's similar to showing the passion about something. I hope that night, like, I showed the passion, and the other captains, when they were interacting with the community, showed the passion. Like, it's clear that they care. And we got that back from the community. Like, when we arrived into the venue, it had been arranged that all of these notes had been written on little sort of bits of
people had submitted messages and wrote messages of love and support on these,
and they
like, post-it notes,
strung them up like bunting across the room. And I remember, like, me and some of the other captains seeing it, and yeah, we were in tears, taking photos of these things, and just I've never felt this kind of the love and the unity of such a big group of people. It was undescribable. It really was.
So you operated under your placeholder name for some weeks. What were the conversations going on in the background?
It was kind of a mix, and again, I don't want to put too much of a businessy angle on it, but it was, the difficulty for me was just trying to align such different views. I'd say, like most situations, you've got the majority of the people who kind of have a middling view. Nothing's black and white, but there's always some sort of strong black and white views. So how do you just get a representative sample from the group and just figure out kind of what's best? So there was also conversations happening with the kind of Midnight Runners entity. So the couple of people that worked for the company, who I don't want to speak on their behalf of kind of which side they agreed with, but they were certainly in a difficult position where essentially the entity that was paying them and how that was being steered was not the same as maybe what they thought was the right thing to do. So I think that the people that were caught in the crossfire, it was difficult for them, and also very difficult when personal relationships were involved. Like some of the people who were working for Midnight Runners were close friends with some of the captains. And of course, what we were doing was causing, material impact and difficulty for the paid employees. Very difficult to navigate. And I hope we did the right thing by trying to over communicate, and I tried to listen and just take a kind of a neutral stance when in doubt, and then just let the sort of the discussions happen. And I think this was the outcome that then sort of came to be was a combination of kind of what had set off in London, but also a feeling from some of the other Midnight Runners community around the world, who of course were watching, intrigued as what was going on, because they'd had similar news about the direction.
Right.
And
this was changing globally.
It was a global change. Some of the newer communities it was kind of much of a muchness for them, but some of the ones that again had been around for a longer time, like the London community, it was a bit more grating for them. So we had lots of messages from support of communities that were sort of standing by us. So, if we're walking, they're walking. And I think what had happened then was that the people that were kind of involved, like professionally or financially, with Midnight Runners, the entity, realized that having a name with no people was not a preferable outcome to having, not being part of this new entity.
200 people with just a placeholder name. Yeah.
Yeah. So they actually agreed to walk away and let us kind of continue as Midnight Runners in a new form, which ended up actually introducing a whole ton of other complications in terms of actually we had to set up a new business. We set up a not-for-profit entity. We had to arrange a lot of things.
They dissolved the kind of global entity, and gave control to each of the individual communities in the different cities.
Kind of, and I definitely don't think this is an interesting podcast conversation of the detail of this, but in the shorter summaries I can give, the new structure for Midnight Runners is a global not-for-profit entity, which is owned by the captains.
Yep.
And it's governed by a board which has representatives from every city.
So you are the board member for London?
No, I'm not, because I decided that I think it would be better for someone else to take that role.
Right.
I've been, it taken a strain on me to get through that time. And also I have a tremendous amount of trust and respect for the other captains. And arguably, some of them could do a better role than me in representing London.
Sure.
So I'm focusing on, leading London, leading the community, leading the captains, and actually the interactions with the board level is being managed by other people in the captaincy for London. So now that board has, if the board decides they need an employee, the board will agree on a job description. They will do the hiring and they will hire that employee. If we want to get a sponsor on board, again, that happens. So there's a lot more accountability and oversight, and the fact that it's a not-for-profit, it all just feels how it should have been from the start.
Yeah, it almost seems like you have obviously gone through a bit of turmoil with some of the stresses involved with not knowing what's going to happen, but it seems like the end result was you kind of got your baby back.
Yeah.
And it's actually fully yours this time.
Yeah.
It seems like you have a lot more control to take it on a direction that you feel comfortable in, and to make sure that is the direction that it continues to go in, which seems like a great ending to the story to some sense. Is it something that you seem more fulfilled in?
I'm really, really, really happy with the outcome. I think it might have been fun to kind of reestablish a new brand and figure out what our values were going to be, but at the end of the day, our values would have been the same because we were instilling those values. It's just that the values weren't aligned with the people that had the power. But then the name was a great name, and people had Midnight Runners t-shirts, and kind of logistically, and also being part of that global community of other communities that were also called Midnight Runners. If we changed our name to something else, it would have been difficult to coordinate, or wouldn't necessarily have been the right thing for every other ex-Midnight Runners community to align on this. It would have just been a pretty difficult thing to manage. So I think this outcome is arguably the best outcome for the communities, London and others, and also the captains. And now this is a Midnight Runners I can be like completely proud of, and what I'm like still as passionate as I was a year ago and 8 years ago.
Yeah, being one of the bigger running communities, and obviously having a global presence. You've said now you've set up a not-for-profit entity. You talked about insurance. You talked about potentially maybe might need an employee of some sort in the future, perhaps. That all costs money. How do you fund this? Because it's not now just a small little local run club that's in East London side that can just be supported by just volunteers. You now clearly have some significant overheads, which now you are in control of. How is that evolving?
Yeah, it's a difficult quandary, but we're quite fortunate that whilst all this was going on, we'd actually been approached by a big global sort of sports apparel brand, which I think I can now say is Mizuno.
Mizuno, wow.
Who,
okay.
From Japan.
Yeah.
Who
lesser known in these parts of the world.
Yeah, but are keen to align with Midnight Runners, partner with Midnight Runners, and we are a key part of their sort of strategic move to kind of become a bit more relevant again.
Yeah.
Because they are a very prestigious running brand.
I would never have known.
But people don't know about it.
Yeah. In baseball, I can see there's
in Japan though,
brand,
but their running profile is a lot higher. So they see Midnight Runners as a very relevant community of people that run more for fun. They have some performance shoes in there as well, as Midnight Runners has some performance runners in its midst. But the Mizuno team were very happy to sort of partner with the new entity. So there was some sort of contractual things we needed to sort out to kind of move it from the old company to the new, but that's all been squared away, and we're fortunate to have them supporting us, and that covers the kind of the basics, things like insurance in each city and things like that. But we have to be a bit more self-sufficient in the cities. And what I think has been quite an exciting change in this new structure is that each city's got a bit more flexibility in perhaps arranging local partnerships. So we have some conversations ongoing with a couple of brands who might support us for a couple of events. We get some money in the coffers, which we can
like little pop-ups or something.
Exactly, which we can use to help better support the community, which could be hiring out a venue or making sure there's pizza for everyone after a special run.
Yeah.
So we're optimistic. We're optimistic about how it's going to go down. I think 2023 for Midnight Runners in London will be an exciting year. We've got some good plans, and I think we'll have a couple of sponsorship arrangements for periods throughout the year. If things go well, and I think we'll be prepared for scenarios like if Mizuno walk away, and I think we need to be as self-sufficient as possible. We are exploring some options in how the community can support. We had some really, really kind offers when we were kind of in this interim stage of, if you need money for speakers or for whatever it might be, just let me know and I'll send you some money. And people were being incredibly generous. So we're not looking to do membership. We still want it to be free, but we are exploring if people want to do an optional payment, or do we do a fundraising drive at the start of the year to get money in to support us for the year? There's a few models we can look at, but we just want to make sure that people feel they don't feel an obligation, and they still feel that they can come along, and that the community will be there, and we as the captains and as Midnight Runners will be there. But I'm not concerned about how this year is going to go.
It sounds very exciting, and I think working with brands as well, even on a more casual level, where they, like you said, mentioned the pop-ups, I think is exciting not just for you but also for the community, because it's some kind of engagement. it gives people who more of a motivation to turn up if they know that there's going to be like free pizza or some kind of shoe trial or some interaction with something that means that they're going to get something more than just the bare basics, which they get it week in, week out.
Yeah.
It keeps things different, it keeps things exciting. So I look forward to seeing what that's going to do to shape things in the years going forward.
Yeah, me too.
I think that's enough. We've certainly had a good 2 hours of conversation, and I'm so incredibly happy with how this has gone. Recording 001.
Good.
And very thankful for you to give your time to me to chat.
Cool. Oh, it's been so nice
On what is essentially a complete startup, and who knows where this will go or what will be in the future of this, but you were the first to sit down in the chair.
Well, I hope we can look back on this and go, wow, you've done some really, really great stuff here and stuff that you've been proud of.
Yeah, well, this
I'm
has been
sure we
one of
will.
them for sure, and been great to pick your brains. And I think it just shows your character as well, just how excited you were to kind of confirm yourself immediately and get some dates in the diary and sit down. I'm really, really thankful for that.
Oh, well, I think you're a fantastically interesting man to speak to, and I know I can learn a lot from you about running, about camera gear, podcasting, whatever it might be. And I think it's just nice to have a chat.
Yes, always good to chat, actually. Yeah, I've enjoyed the experience. Best of luck in Barcelona next month.
Thank you very much.
I guess we should end by saying, if people would like to follow you, would Strava be the best place to follow you? As seeing as you're a Strava athlete, does that mean you have involvement with Strava?
Well, yeah, I'm not the most frequent poster on Instagram at JCE Holt. Occasional poster, but
all the good stuff's on Strava.
All the good stuff's on Strava. I'm not a Strava sponsored athlete. I've done some work for them. I think just because I'm enthusiastic about it. Again, which just shows enthusiasm and passion is the way to get results. I know their UK team, and I do think their platform is a force for good.
Yes.
And I also think putting some photos on your run makes it a bit more interesting and engaging. So
your photography has been stellar. Yeah, I've noticed.
And coming from you, that means a lot.
Yeah,
so thank you.
You must have had a new phone recently, right? I think you were experimenting with the new lenses.
Yeah, I have the new Google Pixel 7 Pro. Yes.
Well, you are a walking advert for that phone with your Strava feed.
Listen up, Google.
Thank you so much, James. Really appreciate it.
Cheers, Tom.
And if anyone is in London on a Tuesday evening, they should come to Midnight Runners, and it will change their life like it has changed yours and it has changed mine. And I hope that someone listening to this will come and check you out.
I hope so too.
Thank you.
Thank you.